Good evening. Welcome to Community Accountability. I'm your host, Hugh Carroll. This is our second episode. Last week we had an amazing viewership, and I was really appreciated. Hopefully I have you all again this week and some more. A quick idea of what the show is about. Community accountability is saying that if you want to have a safe city or a safe town, you must first have a safe neighborhood. In order for the neighborhood to be safe, you must have a safe block that you live on. To have your block be safe, your house has to be safe. You are responsible first for the condition of your neighborhood, and then spreading the message to others, and just being a good neighbor. Tonight, I'd like to start with a thank you to my crew here. We have executive producer of Peter Green. Technical producer is one of the Yo-Yos here, which is a program they do to help youth learn how to run the systems, and that is Dustin Hardy. Dustin, thank you so much for giving me your time again. I appreciate it greatly. Tonight, I have a special guest here next to me. This is Paul Beekman. Paul is a retired law enforcement officer, and I thought his views on the whole community accountability theory would be an amazing thing to have with us. Paul, give me a little bit of your history in law enforcement.
Ooh, where do we start?
Start at the beginning and I know you've worn many, many patches on your shoulders.
I sure have. In 1985, I started out with the Lockport Police. I was a patrolman and warrant officer. During my time with the Lockport Police, I was the neighborhood watch coordinator for several years. Upon retirement, I worked for the Genesee Valley Transportation Company as chief of a railroad police department.
Wow.
And then went on to work for the Somerset Police for a few years, and just recently retired as a sergeant with the Barker, New York Police.
Excellent. And a little bit of background with me and Paul. I have known him for,
Long time.
You're going to hate to hear this, about 30 years I've known Paul now. Luckily, I have never dealt with him in a professional capacity, although he'll tell you also he's one of the few from the Lockport force that I haven't dealt with in a professional capacity. But I've known Paul a lot of years. I know him back from racing at Ransomville Speedway, and up in Welland the one night we decided to play Metal Twister. But my experience with you, Paul, so far has been you are one of the more fair guys.
Thank you.
Your reputation among those of us who were street criminals was that you were very fair. Something I do want to ask up front, though, because it's an important thing in today's climate and today's news. Have you ever had any excessive use of force complaints filed against you in all your years in law enforcement?
Never.
Not a one.
No. In fact, I had guys that I dealt with in an arrest situation come up and say, hey, if anybody ever says anything bad about you, let me know, because I'll tell them the truth that you're a good guy.
Excellent.
Because we're here to serve the community.
Yes. So no complaint. One other question. Have you ever witnessed an officer with your department or with another department where you may have been giving aid who may have been a little overly aggressive?
I have.
You have. And how do you, as a police officer, handle that situation?
That's a real challenge. One particular situation, I voiced my concerns with the elected officials in that community, and unfortunately, they didn't want to hear it.
Any repercussions come back from that on you?
No.
No? Okay. Because I do understand that the whistleblower laws do not extend completely to law enforcement.
You know, there's been so much talk about how bad the police are, and it's just not true. But there are a lot of things we can do to change it to make it better. And one is you need to have some type of provision where an officer can make a complaint against another officer without that fear of having your career get destroyed.
Excellent. Okay.
And I hope the state addresses that.
Hopefully we can get somebody up top who wants to hear that. By the way, tonight our phone lines are going to be open. We'll get the phone number up here on the screen for you. It's 716-563-1710. Feel free to call in at any time. That phone number is live now. Paul, I got some questions I wrote up here just because I wanted to be prepared for tonight, which for me is not all that common to be prepared. But, first, a lot of people want to be involved in their neighborhood. You heard my explanation that everything starts on my porch and it grows from there. Once my block is safe, I can go around the corner and talk to more people, get to know more people. You were able to just recently watch last week's show, and it does spread. And the best example of that would be my daughter, who called in last week, which, in all honesty, I had no idea that was going to happen. That was Elena decided to call in because she had seen me take care of an issue in the neighborhood that was a neighborhood issue and could be handled without having to call law enforcement. So, I mean, it spreads when people see it and they live it. But we're limited. We need more people to spread this word. But once you have an issue like the one I had, which I didn't truly handle in the best way, now that I know my daughter witnessed it, how far can a civilian go in prevention or detaining of someone they see actually breaking a law? What are, as a community member, what can we do?
Well, first and foremost, if you see a crime being committed at your house or your neighbors or in your neighborhood, you got to call the police. You can't just look the other way. You can't worry about, is there going to be repercussions if I call? I mean, we all need to work together to have safe neighborhoods. The police cannot do it on their own. We need active community supporters that are letting us know that there's problems. And it's tough. If you see a crime in progress, it can be very dangerous for you to go and engage the suspect.
Yes.
You need to leave that for the police.
Okay. Now, you know me well enough, and hopefully my viewers are starting to learn me well enough to know I'm probably not going to leave it alone. I'm going to say something. I'm going to step out there. I'm going to be seen by the person, and if they give me any grief, I'm probably going to become slightly more aggressive. I know as a law enforcement officer, you have to discourage that. But do you find that happens a little more often where, I caught someone breaking into my neighbor's empty house, and I'm holding them there while my wife's calling to get you there to take care of them?
In all honesty, I've hardly ever encountered that.
Are you? Really?
Yeah.
It's because usually we don't call once we get our hands on them.
Yikes.
Hey, you're not working anymore. You can admit it.
That's true. I'm a retired guy.
Yeah, you're retired now. You just sit
and
back
if you want to
collect.
know what's going on in a community or how to fix things, you really should ask the retired police.
Yeah, and actually, and that is another issue I have, residency for police. I know you've always lived not just in the city, but you've always lived in the heart of the city. You're not in the city of Lockport. We have neighborhoods that are pretty much suburbs, and then we have city neighborhoods. Where Paul has lived as long as I've known him, it's a city neighborhood. You're 3 blocks off of Main Street.
Yeah.
You're right down there. Trouble sometimes gets up as far as your block.
And it's a home that we've been in this has been my family's home since 1944. It was my grandfather's, it was my father's, now it's mine. And, I love my neighborhood. I love my city.
Excellent.
And it bothers me to see it falling apart. And there's so much that could be done to fix things.
Oh, yeah. Question I'm going to be asking everybody. I asked Chris last week. I'm going to ask you. Do you know everybody that lives on your street by name?
I know most of the neighbors.
Most. Now, you do have an alley that runs behind your house. Do you know the people that live on the other side of the alley?
Yeah.
There you go. And my point is, once you know these people,
Well, we all watch out for each other.
you all watch for each other when you do know them. I had a discussion with a gentleman the other day who told me he knew about half the people in his neighborhood, and they had a similar relationship as they do in my neighborhood and your neighborhood, but only about half. And I was thinking about that. If I know half my neighborhood on a personal level, that means I'm watching the entire neighborhood. So the half I don't know, I'm still going to learn their habits, learn when there's an issue at their house that might need attention, and be there to support them, whether I know them or not. Would you say that's a fair...
It's one of the main principles with Neighborhood Watch. That you know your neighborhood, you know your neighbors, and you look out for each other.
Yes, and my thing is, I'm trying to get to the example. You knew my father. Neighborhood Watch is a great program, and it instigates this. But it seems like with my father, we were in Neighborhood Watch long before you and him got together and he put the sign up in the neighborhood.
In fact, it was your dad that got me involved in Neighborhood Watch. I just realized that.
Really?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, long before that, though, my father had the same mindset. He knew everybody on the block. Now, my father was a little more opinionated than I am, and he had some rub with some people in the neighborhood where they didn't get along at all. But I also know that if there was ever a problem, he would be the first one to go. And again, it's just that sense of community that I'm trying to get out here.
It's sorely needed as the years went on. As the neighborhoods changed, we started knowing less and less of who lived on the street.
Mm-hmm.
When these houses started to become apartment houses, you had a lot of transient people in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And, things kind of start slipping away when that happens.
Sure. Now, back to the residency. Where do you stand on police residency laws?
When I started, it was mandatory that we lived within the city of Lockport. So you had literally the entire police department living throughout the entire city. And my neighbors knew that I was the local policeman, and they felt comfortable living there. In fact, I'm still the Lockport cop.
Oh, yeah.
I firmly believe, and this will probably offend a lot of my police friends, but there should be residency requirements and that the officers should live in the community that they serve. The problem is there's so much hostility towards the police right now that officers are uncomfortable living in a lot of neighborhoods because there's people that are retaliating against them. That's got to stop too.
With the Barker, New York Police.
Excellent. And a little bit of background.
If you want to get the police back in your neighborhoods, you got to understand that that is an issue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, now I know I spoke with an officer recently in Lockport who used to live over by the hospital across from the park. And they decided to move out of the city because he had people hanging out in the park, and that was kind of his baby. He babysat that park when he was off duty. That was still his, because it's right across the street. And he had his 8-year-old son out in the driveway, and he had some of the older, troublesome kids from the neighborhood pointing across the street directly at his son, who was in the driveway at the time. And he decided at that point just to walk away from the neighborhood. I'm not calling him out. I'm not saying the neighborhood exactly. I'm not saying the officer. Everyone has to do what they feel is right for them. But could he have handled that individual? Was there anything he could do? He knows these kids are out there causing trouble. How could he have dealt with them?
I would have called the officers that were on duty, called down to headquarters, and have them send a patrol car over.
But how far can the officers go at that point, though?
I mean, he could have confronted them. I don't know if I necessarily would have.
Mm-hmm. I'm saying even the responding officers.
But it all depends on the situation.
Right. And this goes into a big reason I invited you in tonight was, what is the police role in preventing crime? How did the police can they keep a neighborhood safe? Or I've always said that police are not preventative; they're reactionary.
And they are. It's the nature of our job.
Mm-hmm.
But also, patrol serves a function where you can watch neighborhoods and, and patrolling a city for 25 years, I knew every nook and cranny, and I knew when something was out of place. But we can't do it alone. We need people to call us and say, hey, there's a problem here. This guy's doing something that's shady, and, I'm really concerned. When the neighbors sit in silence, the neighborhoods start to fall apart. And if we want to save our neighborhoods, we all need to work together. We need to get over this mindset that snitching's bad and that I'm a narc. You're going to lose your neighborhood if you have that mindset.
Right.
The police are here to help. We are not the enemy.
Right. And that's something I covered last week, and I'll say it again here with you. There's a difference in being a narc or a rat or a snitch and being just a neighbor, a good neighbor. If the guy next door to me is having a party a little bit later at night, radio's up loud, people are getting loud, I'm not going to be that little rat that calls the police to deal with it. I'm going to go knock on his door and say, hey, man, can you knock it off a little? Just back down.
We're talking crimes. We're talking drug dealing in your neighborhoods.
But to have the difference be said there, because there are people out there who they see someone walking down the street who doesn't belong there, their first thing is they call 911, which now is going to pull an officer off a patrol in a different neighborhood because some guy's taking a shortcut home tonight versus the way he usually walks. And I'm not advocating that kind of calling of the police. You watch them. When they walk by you, say hello to them. Let them know that you see them. If they are up to no good, they know they've been seen. If they're not up to no good, just saying hello isn't offensive in any way. That's my theory, and it's I know it's tough for you too, because if I know the guy at the corner is dealing out of his house, and I call you every time I see the 5-minute car stops, what can you do? Are you able to just go and deal with him?
No, you've got to build a case. And unfortunately, sometimes these things take months, they take years.
And why is that? Why is it that I can't show you the pictures of all the cars coming in and out and tell you, hey, this guy, he's running a lab over here, I think. And you can't just go in and bust him for the lab. What is the limitations there?
I mean, everyone has constitutional protections, and thank God we have that. That's why we live in a free society. And the police just can't go in and bust a door down because they think something's going on there. I mean, that's completely illegal. They build a case, maybe they make some buys, and then they make an arrest when they have a solid case. And I know it's frustrating to the community because we all want immediate satisfaction, and unfortunately, in a lot of these serious cases, it comes down to deferred gratification, and that it's going to take a while, but the problem will get corrected.
Okay. I have a comment from one of the people watching right now, from Kevin Hutchinson, that downtown Niagara Falls is so screwed up. If his kids wanted a cold drink from 7-Eleven, he has to drive them around the corner to get there, basically. Can this city, like Niagara Falls, which has a very bad crime problem currently, can it be corrected? Or is it just a lost cause?
No, I would never want to say a lost cause. That's pretty harsh. I do think that New York State may have made a bad move with this criminal justice bail reform.
Now, I find a lot of people on I hate to bring politics in. I keep politics out of my show. But I find with the bail reform, it seems to be a political hot-button issue. A lot of people on the right say that bail reform is the worst thing ever. A lot of people on the left are saying it was the right thing to do because we're punishing before sentencing. My personal opinion is the bail laws that we had were bad. The ones we have now are bad. There's a happy medium.
Yeah, we got to meet in the middle, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, there were a lot of people getting arrested for, say, aggravated unlicensed operation that were being brought down, booked, and thrown in a cell.
It's happened to me.
And
I was actually...
It's absurd.
It was $250 bail. I had no family in town. My family was out of town. I had no other phone numbers I knew. I sat for 3 days on an unlicensed operation.
And that's
over
wrong.
$250.
It's absolutely wrong. And there's a lot of times there's mistakes with Department of Motor Vehicles.
Yeah. Child support is a big one that people have their license restored, but it's still showing as suspended.
No, but I don't want to say that bail was used as a weapon. But with this current situation where you're giving appearance tickets for even what I consider violent felonies, it's not going to work. You've got offenders going out, getting arrested 3 and 4 times a night. They're given an appearance ticket, and they just keep committing crimes. Maybe a fair compromise would be, we're going to give you one break. Here's your appearance ticket. This is our show that we trust you, that you're going to show up in court, and to let the criminal justice system run its course. We won't put bail on you because we trust that you're going to show up for court and you're not going to commit any more crimes. But on a second arrest, there should be provisions where the police and judicial systems are allowed to place bail, because there are some real criminals out there that are gaming the system, and our communities are falling apart because of it.
Okay. Yeah, and, back to the subject here, the bail reform. By the way, hello, Vales. I see you checked in there to say hello tonight. Back to the, Niagara Falls, is it lost? I realize, and I'm very realistic about this, I have an idealistic viewpoint on the community involvement, but at the same time, neighborhoods such as where the Coastal gas station is over on Walnut and 19th, that neighborhood's not going to be able to just get a front porch mindset all of a sudden and be fixed. It's taken us 50 years for that neighborhood to fall apart to that level. In other neighborhoods throughout the city, lower numbers of Midtown, a lot of Midtown in general, out in Lockport, our impact zone, which is really making a change. The impact zone's starting to really turn around. But it's not an overnight fix.
Kevin, it's not an issue of just the police coming in and fixing a neighborhood. We need to have our governments come in and offer incentives for homeowners to fix their property up. I'm a firm believer in the broken window theory, where if you allow one window in a neighborhood to stay broken and not fixed, the whole neighborhood then starts to crumble.
Yeah, my house might be that. I have a little motorcycle horde in the driveway.
In the city of Lockport, if you want to fix your house up, so you want to site it, they go in and they jack your assessment. So they're discouraging people from fixing up the neighborhoods, and these rundown neighborhoods now look very attractive to those that want to do bad. And, it takes everyone working together, police, government, the neighborhood, to fix this. It's a big problem, and there's all kinds of different components to it.
Okay, yeah. Here in the Falls, I personally believe if we start in LaSalle, we start in DeVoe, and we deal with the property crimes, the people breaking into cars at night, put pressure on them. That'll keep those neighborhoods from turning from the good to the bad. And then hopefully the mindset of community accountability out of that neighborhood can travel to the next block and the next block. And what we'll do is we'll push the criminal element either out of their current mindset, which a lot of them will change. An individual we were talking about earlier, I'm not going to say his name here, but he's a good example of he took so much pressure that he's pretty well changed his life. And, he was definitely not on the good side. But if we pressure the neighborhood, tighten it up, tighten it up, tighten it up, then I believe the police will be able to spend more time in that with the heavy criminal element that have been pushed into the tighter areas. A problem I've seen in a lot of cities, Niagara Falls is probably one of the worst, is the city structure itself creates these dividing lines. To get from LaSalle to downtown, you have a big industrial stretch where there's no communities. Coming from DeVoe over, you have a little stretch there that's kind of a dividing line, a solid dividing line that once it gets to that point, it seems like everything stops. How do we push beyond that dividing line?
Well, again, I think it goes back to fixing up neighborhoods. You know, we need to have meaningful jobs for the community. Lockport was a heavily industrialized city in its day.
Oh, so was the Falls. I mean,
yeah, and absolutely same with the Falls.
Yeah, up here in the Falls, we had all down Hyde Park was all industrial. Over in along Buffalo Ave was just nothing but industrial.
My family lost all their jobs at Carborundum. I mean, it was devastating. You know, my one uncle went from having a well-paying job at Carborundum to having to deliver pizzas to put food on his table. We got to change that. We've got to fix our neighborhoods to make them attractive for businesses to want to come into the community and set up their business there.
So you're saying the neighborhood's got to be fixed before the jobs will come?
Yeah.
I actually agree completely with you. There needs to be a desire. There needs to be a reason for the businesses to come in. And it doesn't matter if it's a corner store or if it's a 1,500 employee factory. I believe they're not going to come into a place that they think is just packed full of criminals.
Well, I can tell you that my fiance is president and CEO of a large company in Canada. We were out for a walk, and I showed her a business that was similar to hers. She said, "Hey, maybe I'll buy them." And I've learned whatever she says she's going to do something, she does. Over the years, founders in, and they were taken back at how run down the city was. And the consensus was there may not be good people to fill these jobs because the city's just beat. And we got to change that.
Okay.
And that will bring businesses back.
Okay. And now the next one. I've actually spoken with you about this one in the past. And you don't quite see it as I do, but I don't want to make it sound like I'm throwing you all softballs here tonight either. My personal belief is that in a neighborhood, when law enforcement shows up, if it's a neighborhood such as your block, my block, where they see everybody in the neighborhood is not only involved, but we're out there, that the police will do just that little bit more than if they show up into the high crime neighborhood where they already know nobody saw nothing. My belief is somehow we got to get the law enforcement to encourage people to speak, but at the same time, we got to get them to still put in the work when no one is speaking. And I think in some of the east side of Buffalo is a good example. The police come, they take the report, they leave. The detective comes the next day, takes the report, leaves, puts it on his desk. Where if it's up around Hurdle Ave in Buffalo, the police come, the detectives come, the pressure stays on, because I believe it's because the community shows they want answers, where in the other neighborhoods, the community's saying, I'm hands off, it's you do your job. Would you agree with that to any extent? I know it's a tough one because you got to speak against your brothers if you agree with me. And if you disagree with me, reality is a little troubling there.
It's too narrowly defined, and that's the problem. You've got neighborhoods where people are living in fear, that they're terrified to come forward when there's provisions where you can make anonymous tips to the police to let us know who's doing these shootings, who's got the guns. I don't believe that the police are riding around in their cars saying, well, this is a rundown neighborhood, so, forget
just
these
got
people.
their radio on, watching their laptop, and just driving down
I mean,
the rundown street.
The men and women in law enforcement care deeply for their communities, and they want nothing more than to restore these safe communities. But it goes back to what I said earlier. Everyone needs to work together. When you see something, you need to say something. And without that, it makes it extremely difficult for the police to do their job.
Okay. I hear sirens in the background here right now, as a matter of fact. Just really drives it home on the show. Yeah, like I said, from my own personal, now I was on the other side from you. And I know that when I was causing a little more mischief, I would pick neighborhoods where, first, I knew nobody was going to talk. And secondly, the police weren't going to ask people too much to talk because they already knew the answer. And that's where my viewpoint is coming from, is being on the other side of it and living it just as you lived it from your side. I know every officer takes every complaint as serious as they can. Is that outside or is that... Okay, I wanted to make sure it wasn't Peter... I wanted to make sure it wasn't Peter playing games again. And Ohio Barb here says that we're having an interesting discussion regarding community safety.
Oh, cool.
And again, the phone lines are open. Anyone who is watching, I know there's a couple of you right now, but it's 716-563-1710. Questions, comments, feedback, anything you wish, feel free to call in. There's something I was thinking about on the way here, and it isn't so much because you were here, but you're the perfect target tonight. Do you think the end goal from a law enforcement and government point of view should be more policing, better policing, or less need for policing?
That's a good question. You could double the size of the police department and you will not make an impact on crime.
That is a major statement. Pretty much goes against everything that people are saying. Everyone wants
everybody's
more police,
like, we hire more cops, crime will go away. No.
So what will stop it?
Neighborhoods coming together, reporting crimes, people stepping up and saying, hey, this guy did it. And when we can get these criminals off the street, we can save our neighborhoods.
Now, here's a question for that, and it feeds in nicely to it, actually. How much, at what point in giving information to the police does it go from me just giving general information, to my name has to be on a report and police have to know, and once the court case comes out, my name's going to be there and I have to worry about repercussion. Now, you know me enough to know I don't care about repercussion. You want to try it? Try it. I'm there to take it. And it's not going to end well for the other person. I will defend my own. But other people, such as most of my neighborhood, they may be afraid of repercussions. How far can they go before their name has to be on the report and available in court?
Well, I think they could go quite far. I mean, they could. Every department has an anonymous tip line.
Is it truly anonymous?
Yeah,
Okay.
It is.
Because, like, right now, if somebody was to call in, I would see their name, I would see the phone number they're calling from, and it would take me all of about 20 seconds to find out where they live.
No.
And I am not a technologically smart person at all. That's why we have Dustin over here running our computers.
Doing a good job, too.
Yes, our 15-year-old technical producer, Dustin, he's killing it back there tonight.
But like, what I said before tonight, we need people to get over that fear of stepping up and giving a statement. And there probably should be more protection from the state so that, someone doesn't become a victim of a crime because they did the right thing.
Okay. There is protection. There is programs that are out there now too for people who want to speak up.
There is.
Do you think we do a good enough job of letting people know? The officers on the ground when something happens and they're canvassing a neighborhood, do you believe they're giving people enough information to know, listen, you can be protected. I don't need your name. I just need what kind of car was it? Did you see a license plate? What the person looked like? Are the officers explaining that you don't need their name in order to get that information? Or are the officers just asking for the information and they're getting the standard, I didn't see nothing, I don't want to know nothing, it's not safe for me to tell you?
No, I'm sure that goes both ways. And, the whole thing is, if you see something, you got to say something. People are getting killed. Innocent people are being victims in these shootings. And, we got to get these criminals off the street. A lot of these bad guys, when I started, they might beat up each other. Maybe they'd use a knife. These kids are carrying guns and they have no fear of, if I shoot somebody, they're going to die.
Yeah.
And we can't allow this to happen. We're losing communities over this.
Yeah, and like I said, how can we get the word to people? I mean, those who are watching and those who are going to watch the replay, they're already in this camp. They already understand you got to be involved with your neighborhood. You got to be involved with your neighbors. You got to watch everything. If things get out of hand, you got to utilize the police. Well, but how do we get people to understand this? And how do we get the people, like I said, I've actually been at a crime scene as just a general witness. The officer came over, first thing he asked is, what did I see? And just left it at that, left it open. Well, I'm not going to speak up. I don't want to get shot. Are our officers being trained to put that little extra sentence in there? I don't need your name. What did you see? And can we get that into our training in the future, maybe, if it's not already there?
I don't see any reason why it couldn't. I took several good interview and interrogation courses, and that's how I would conduct investigations and talk to people, and it was very effective.
Okay.
But another thing we've got to get over, especially over the last several months, there's been a vicious attack that law enforcement is all bad.
Yeah.
And the media's got to stop this, because they're also causing people to be afraid to reach out to the police to let us know that there's problems.
Oh, yeah. The media is on one side or the other of this issue. It's either they are cheerleaders for law enforcement or they want them gone. The middle ground. I don't want excessive law enforcement in my neighborhood for two reasons. One, I don't want to have tax-paid babysitters. And that's what it begins to feel like in an over-policed area. But the other reason is, if I have excessive police officers in my neighborhood, that means my neighborhood's not good.
That's true.
They don't drive around East Amherst to a car in a car every 20 minutes for a reason. And it's not because of the ethnic makeup, it's because of the crime stats. Getting people to understand the difference in over-policing. And like I said, there are some abuses. We've witnessed a few, and we've witnessed a few that weren't abuses that looked like it initially. And the media is really feeding into it, I believe. And I don't know why they're feeding in so much, but they are.
It's made it extremely dangerous for the men and women of law enforcement to go out and do their job. It's endangered the safety of communities because people are afraid of the police, and it's not good. The men and women I worked with, the officers that I know and represent throughout Western New York and upstate New York, they're good people. And there are bad police officers out there. There's got to be mechanisms in place to weed those officers out. But we're talking 99.9% of the men and women wearing a badge are there to make this community a safer place. And it's a false narrative when you talk about defunding the police. We are not the villains. We are not the reason that there's problems in neighborhoods.
Yeah, no, I will say that I understand. So maybe it's a little different for me in my dealings with law enforcement. I've had over 40 contacts with law enforcement throughout my life. And in those 40 contacts, I've never even been handcuffed hard. I believe it's because when the officer shows up and says, "You're under arrest," I go, "Okay." And that's it. It seems like the current trend is to fight the police, get as many there, see how many can get on top of you. Have you ever had a suspect that you were detaining fight and struggle with you, and you decide, you know what, I think I'll just let him go. It's not worth the fight.
I don't think it works that way.
Well, that seems to be a narrative a lot of people are saying.
You know, and the underlying issue with some of these incidents that have occurred throughout the country, it involved the element of resisting arrest. If you comply with the officer's orders, none of the other stuff would happen. And let the justice system work itself out.
Right. And
if you're innocent...
My message on that is a little different. It's not just blanket comply. Comply with the officer's orders, and if he says you're under arrest, you're under arrest. If he says you got to tell him something and give him information, you don't. Not without an attorney.
Yeah, that's two different situations.
Right. But I think so many people think complying involves just surrendering to them completely and surrendering your rights. The other thing is, in all my contacts with law enforcement, it's been, you're under arrest, okay, and I shut my mouth. And I let my lawyer and the judge and the prosecutor deal with the outcome. You're not the judge. You're not the prosecutor. You can't drop my charges. You can decide if I'm getting charged a little heavier or not, which is another trend I've seen. I hate to do it. I told you I wasn't going to hit you with a gotcha moment, but I'm going to play it because it just popped into my head, and I'm sorry. But I have noticed a trend, not just personally, but in general, that the police do know whatever charge you're putting on someone's getting reduced. So it seems to me that they do overcharge a little, so the reduced charge kind of falls more in line of what the crime actually was. I'm not asking if you've done it yourself, because it would open you up to liabilities, or the police department, department. But
I've never done that, and I've never seen someone overcharge. I mean, they're charged with what the penal law allows the officer to charge with.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, it just seems to me, I had an incident once where I had a burglary charge that wound up being reduced to a criminal trespass.
But you got to look at...
And if you looked at what actually happened that night, it was a criminal trespass. So I feel
but
like
it depends
I
on
was
the way,
overcharged because they knew it was going to be dropped back down.
But look at the burglary statutes in New York State. Burglary third is enters and remains unlawfully within a dwelling. That's pretty darn vague.
Yeah.
And
those
things maybe should be tightened up if you have a concern with that.
But yeah, you see where I'm going with that. That is really vague, and it is an overcharge a lot of times on what should have been a criminal trespass is often charged as a burglary. And then when word gets out you were charged with a burglary, everyone looks at you even worse. And criminal trespass, you forgot to leave. There's a huge difference. And the public perception of those two charges really hurts you. And then there's also the bail issue as it was then, not current. A burglary third holds a pretty heavy bail, minimums. $5,000, I believe, was the minimum. Where a criminal trespass could have been an ROR. So our officers possibly at times not overcharging, but going to the the maximum meaning of the charge, or the minimum meaning of the charge in order to make it a heavier charge, to detain people for a bail reason. Could that be happening? Because if it's going to be an ROR, like I said, if it was a criminal trespass, I don't even think that was booking at the time. I believe even then it was an appearance ticket.
No, that was a...
It was a bookable.
It was a bookable offense.
But it's still going to be an ROR. I'm back out 45 minutes to an hour. Where burglary third you had to wait till morning to get arraigned. Could you see officers possibly taking advantage of that just to get somebody off the street for the night?
No.
Okay. This is, we're different worlds. We're different sides of the same coin. We're friends, but I see the world on the complete other color as you do. You're blue, I'm red.
I mean,
whatever.
I never was riding around in my patrol car thinking, I want to arrest somebody. And
and I'm not saying
tons
that.
of paperwork.
Yeah.
And all I'm thinking is I just want to make it home for the end of the shift. And
Right. And last week I brought up the issue of a gentleman I had problems with in the neighborhood, Frank. And one of the city officers, because he knew this problem was ongoing, he had gone to Frank a couple of days later and warned him, do not go up there. And Frank got a little cocky with him. And the officer said, no, listen, you are allowed to go up there. Don't do it, because either you're going to get arrested and I'm going to have a ton of paperwork and it's going to make me angry, or they're going to kill you and I'm going to have even more paperwork and I'm going to be even more angry. So, yeah, I understand. Officers they're no different than us at any of our jobs. Sitting here tonight, I really wish somebody would call in, because that'd be less talking I have to do. You can do some of my work for me. My producer hopes I don't ask for too many background changes, because it's more work. And, law enforcement, you're still humans. You want to do as little as possible and complete your job.
Well,
and I understand that.
The individual you spoke of.
Yeah, you know him.
The underlying problem with a lot of these crime, it's addiction issues.
Yes.
And
and addiction is a big problem. We don't have, the thing is, we do have the systems. The people don't want to take advantage of them. A lot of times.
The bail reform has probably severely impacted drug court. I've had individuals that I arrested. They had addiction issues. And because they had this case hanging over them, I was able to encourage them to go through the drug court, and they successfully completed it, and they completely changed their life. Where now you give someone an appearance ticket, their only incentive is to get back out there and do some more drugs. And we're just creating a bigger problem. And I'm not calling for bail reform to be eliminated, but let's meet in the middle and come up with a workable solution.
I'd be good with that. Like I said, the old system that we had, it was becoming punitive. And,
I absolutely agree. And
punitive bail is wrong. You can't sentence me before I'm sentenced.
I cast no illusions. Bail was used to punish a lot of our minority members of the community, and that's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, or the frequent flyer program, our bails would get higher and higher as punitive. A good example would be a panhandler of Niagara County that everybody knows, Jed.
Jed has severe addiction issues.
Oh, yes.
It all comes back to drug addiction.
The problem with Jed is he has been offered through the courts, through drug court, while incarcerated. He's been offered help. He's had private groups, charitable groups, offer him, because he's become so famous lately. They've come out and offered to help him. He refuses it. What do we do? And under the old bail system, his bails were starting to creep up, and he's a smart criminal. Nothing he ever got arrested for was more than a 10-day. So, and he knows you get arrested for a 10-day sentence on a Wednesday, Friday night you're out.
A lot of the people I encountered, they game the system, and we need to really look at how these charges are reduced. And you've got some individuals that really should be punished. And you just can't keep letting them go, and then they just keep escalating their crimes, and and our neighborhoods fall apart because of it.
Exactly. Yeah, and there again, back to the community neighbor issue. If I know somebody's renting around the corner from me, and I know this individual because I'm out there getting to talk to everyone, I see that they've got an addiction problem. Once you know people with addiction, it's not hard to see people with addiction. How would you recommend somebody even approach this? Because now they're bringing questionable people around. They're endangering my neighborhood because of their addiction. But at the same time, I don't want to go and say, listen, man, you're a junkie. You got to go.
You got to look you got to look at the landlords that are renting these properties out. I mean, Lockport was a city filled with single-family homes that were converted into multiple dwellings, and there are some slumlords out there that they're trying to extract as much money out of that house, and they don't care who they put in, and they don't care if the neighborhoods are destroyed.
I believe we used to have a newspaper editor locally who notorious slumlord. I believe he actually lost a few of his properties through building inspection and through court cases because of the people.
And I'm a firm believer in, if you want to fix neighborhoods, you need to hire more building inspectors to get them to go out there and go after these slumlords. And it kind of goes back to the broken window theory. If you let one property fall into disrepair, eventually the house next door goes, the house next to that goes, and then you lose the whole block.
And I agree. In Midtown, you can see this very well up here in the Falls. You have entire city blocks where you might have 2 occupied houses, 3 abandoned board-ups, and the rest are empty lots. And those neighborhoods have gotten to be really bad between the squatters and the board-ups and just the lack of eyes in the neighborhood. If, say, a neighbor went out and recognized, these 3 empty houses, nobody's mowing the yards. If they went out and they just went and spent the extra 15, 20 minutes to mow one of the yards, would that improve a neighborhood, do you believe? Would that be a good starting point to make the neighborhood appear better? And then the criminal element may
certainly helps,
not take advantage.
We need to crack down on the big banks and all the zombie homes that they're just allowed to fall into continual disrepair, and there's no accountability with the banks. I mean, they're destroying neighborhoods. We need to hold people accountable for neighborhood problems. And I'm not saying the drug addict, it's everybody. We need to accept responsibility that this is the neighborhood we live in. We want to make it better. We're going to report crimes. If there's a zombie house on the street, we need to make sure that the municipality is going to address that issue and get that bank up in front of the housing court to get this resolved.
Okay. We're starting to run longer than I was expecting to here tonight. I've got so much that I want to ask you still, but we're going to save it for another time. I'm hoping I can have you back again, Paul.
Yeah, if you want.
I want to take care of a couple of things real quick. First, some updates from last week's show. As I said initially, the call from my daughter was not planned, but her calling in made me feel so good because she witnessed me looking out for the neighborhood. And she remembers it, which means when it's her turn to be a homeowner in a neighborhood, hopefully that'll still be with her of how you take care of your neighborhood. That was a beautiful thing. Right after I went off air last week, I had an older gentleman from Canada call and gave me and Chris, who was my guest last week, an opportunity to be a good neighbor. He lives in Canada, and since COVID, he hasn't been able to cross the border. He has a P.O. box where all his mail goes to on the U.S. side of the border. Well, Chris is now dealing with the postmaster out of that post office. He's dealing with the older gentleman up in Canada. We are going to get his mail out of his P.O. box and send it up to him. So we're able to just be a good neighbor and bring your neighbor's mail in when they weren't home. And that's all that is.
That's fantastic. And I want to give a shout out to all my Canadian friends and family that are watching. I miss you guys and can't wait for this crisis to be over with. And I can't wait to get over to Canada to see everybody again.
Yeah, and our executive producer, Peter Green, he is from Canada. He's from Toronto primarily.
Hey?
And for Peter, this makes sense because, Canadians are just so nice, so they already have community accountability. But just a general, all Canadians
let
are
me
nice.
tell you that the Canadian neighborhood that I live in compared to my neighborhood, we know everybody.
You got out there.
Everybody watched out for each other, and it was a beautiful thing, and everybody got along. And I mean, this was a really mixed neighborhood, and I find in general people in Canada are much more easygoing, and they're not as uptight with these racial issues. And man, we got to do that here in America.
It's because they're trying not to freeze.
Oh, it's not that cold up there, eh? That's what Tim Hortons is for.
And one more update. I had someone come up to me this week. They had watched last week's show, and he got thinking. He's a manager of a local bakery and coffee place in Lockport. And he got thinking he only knew his immediate neighbors. He didn't know his neighborhood. And the message of this show was good enough that he brought home a bunch of bagels from his place one day at the end of the day and went out, introduced himself to the rest of the neighborhood. So they know who he is. He knows who they are now. Will they build a strong neighborhood out of it? You don't know. But he took the first step, the important step. Get out there, meet your neighbors, talk to them, and grow. Paul, also, I do keep my show apolitical. It's very important. I have my views, you have your views, Peter has his, and we may not all agree on them all. But I am going to do something a little different. I'm going to let you make an announcement here just because I love breaking news. Dustin, can you give me a breaking news banner on the bottom here?
1 second.
Yeah, that's not a problem. While Dustin's doing that, I'm going to go over a the week since gotten an update on, and that is this morning there was a hotel fire on Niagara Falls Boulevard that was ruled as an arson from somebody that was in there. The update is an arrest has been made in that arson. I can only assume it's either through cameras, somebody at the hotel spoke up, something along those lines. I haven't got all the information of it yet. But I'm so glad to know that arson of an occupied structure scares me because you don't know it's happening until you're trapped when that building's on fire.
It's very disturbing. A lot of the criminal element is starting to use arson. They're starting to burn out people they don't like, and it's bad. It's really bad.
We got our banner up, Paul. Let me get the breaking news from here.
I ran for alderman in the first ward of City of Lockport in 2019, lost by a few votes. I've made a decision that I will be running again. I firmly believe that if you want to make changes, you've got to get involved in politics. You need to get out and vote.
Politics or government?
Government. Yeah, politics can be a little bit of a naughty word.
Yeah, politics, I think, divides people more than anything.
The most important weapon we have is our ability to vote. We have a choice on who we have as an elected leader. I want to give the first ward residents of Lockport and the city of Lockport the opportunity to possibly, allow me to serve them and bring my expertise and my years of being a Lockport police officer and my ideas on how to revitalize communities and try to bring about change. But I will be running in 2021 for first ward alderman in the city of Lockport again.
That's excellent. Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to break this. Hopefully we can spread this other places. And as in for my closing tonight, well, first, real quick, got to take care of some business. If you like the show, a business that wants to advertise, funding the studio, funding the the kids that do their free work here and learn the systems, it costs money. So if you own a business and you want to advertise, if you know someone who owns a business, send them the show. See if it's a message they like and they want to advertise here. If you do, give me a call at the phone number. It's listed. Message me on Facebook. Any way you think you can get a hold of me, get a hold of me, and we'll work something out. Now, in for the closing of the night, this week we had the national election for president. I've watched through this campaign and the last couple of years, people become more and more and more divided. If you allow the national election, no matter which side you're on, no matter how you believe, if you allow it to dictate how you interact with your neighbors, especially after today, you need to reevaluate. We are here for each other. We are not here to divide each other. I don't care who my neighbor voted for. I am still there to protect him, protect his house, and look out for him as he is for me. So
It's the absolute truth.
And in the end, it's an election. It's one rich white old millionaire fighting against another rich white old millionaire so that they can have power. And that's all it is. In the end, we're neighbors. We're communities. Everything starts on your front porch, people. Then it goes to your block. Then it goes to the neighborhood. Then it goes citywide. Share the word.
You know, I'd like to add to
one
that.
more thing.
We can't let national issues affect local elections. And I found that to be the case when I ran for office last time. It should be about putting the most qualified candidate in office to improve the community. And it shouldn't be based on whether this person's a Democrat or Republican. On a local election, national issues have no role in anything. This is all about fixing and saving our communities.
And I will say Paul does believe in that completely. He has run as a Democrat. He's a lifelong Democrat. First time Paul was involved in a political campaign was my father's Republican campaign for mayor. He got involved with us on that.
I don't think people should be that narrowly focused on, I'm a Democrat, I'm only going to support Democrats, I'm a Republican, I'm only going to support Republicans. It's about putting the right people in the right place.
Exactly. Paul, thank you for being the guest tonight. I appreciate
thanks for having
it.
me. This was great.
Everybody else out there, thank you for tuning in tonight. Patty, I seen you. Kathy, Dustin, Kim, your comments were noted. Sorry I didn't get to reading them. All of a sudden I was running short, then I ran really long. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. I miss you all in Canada. We'll be together soon.